I will not stand here and pretend. The towers are empty, the offices are quiet, the investors, some of them, have left. We built faster than the world could fill. We believed growth had no ceiling. Perhaps we were wrong to believe that.
Dubai's business district was supposed to be the financial capital of the entire Middle East. Skyscrapers, headquarters, Fortune 500 relocations. That was the pitch. Here's what it actually became. The most expensive ghost town on Earth. And the government is spending millions to make sure you never find out. They didn't leave with press releases. There were no farewell parties, no dramatic announcements on financial newswires. The departure of capital from Dubai's business core happened the way trust always dies. Slowly, then all at once. Walk through Gate Village on a Tuesday afternoon. The restaurants that once required reservations 2 weeks in advance now seat you immediately. The hostess smiles too quickly. The menus are slightly shorter than last quarter. The wine list has gaps where certain labels used to be. Small signals, the kind only people who were regulars would notice. Internal relocation data from 3 major real estate consultancies tells the story the tourism board refuses to print. Between Q1 and Q3 of 2026, net occupancy in DIFC's premium office towers declined faster than at any point since the 2009 correction. And in 2009, at least the tenants announced they were leaving. This time, they simply stopped renewing. HSBC's regional coordination shifted quietly to Riyadh. A Swiss private bank that had held its Middle East headquarters here since 2007 activated its Singapore contingency in February. A U.S. hedge fund with $4 billion in Gulf exposure reduced its DIFC footprint by 60% in a single lease renegotiation. Money doesn't make speeches, it just moves. Nay, and what remains behind is the architecture of ambition. All the marble lobbies and security turnstiles and gleaming elevator banks, operating at a fraction of the purpose they were built to serve. Here's what nobody tells you about a financial district in decline. The first thing that disappears is not people. It is sound. A functioning office tower has a frequency. The low vibration of HVAC systems running at full load. The constant murmur of phone calls bleeding through glass partitions. The percussion of keyboards. The irregular rhythm of doors opening and closing throughout the day. When occupancy drops below 40%, that frequency changes. The building starts to feel acoustically wrong in a way you sense before you can explain. Hallways are too quiet. Elevator doors open onto floors where the lights are still on. Motion sensor lights obediently flooding empty carpet with light. But there is nobody there. Facility management companies operating in DIFC have begun renegotiating their own contracts. Not because they want to, because their clients and the building owners are no longer generating the revenue to sustain full-service agreements. Cleaning frequencies drop first, then concierge hours, then lobby staffing. The building still stands. The glass is still polished, but the organism inside has gone quiet. What does it cost to maintain a tower nobody works in? The answer is the question nobody in Dubai's property sector wants to answer publicly, because the answer leads to the next question, and the next question leads somewhere very uncomfortable. The Riyadh gravitational pull. Understand something about capital. It does not disappear. It relocates. And in 2026, the address it keeps relocating to is Riyadh. Saudi Arabia's Vision 2030 was always theoretical to the financial class operating out of Dubai. A political project, a long-term ambition, something to observe from a distance with mild professional curiosity. Then, the incentives became real. Then, the infrastructure arrived. Then, the regulatory framework stabilized enough that a CFO could sign off on a regional headquarters relocation without the board asking uncomfortable questions. And then, the geopolitical risk calculus around Dubai shifted. And suddenly, Riyadh wasn't an alternative. It was the obvious answer. The migration is not total. It never is. Financial ecosystems don't transplant cleanly. But the direction of gravity has changed. Junior analysts are being sent to Riyadh for what are described internally as temporary assignments. Those assignments are not temporary. The offices being set up to support them are not temporary. The lease agreements signed for those offices are 5 years minimum. Dubai's financial community built itself on the idea that it was the only serious option in the region. Neutral, globally connected, English-speaking, efficient, safe. 3 of those 5 adjectives are now being disputed simultaneously. And a financial district that loses its claim to being the obvious choice does not get a second chance to make that argument. The port behind the towers. Pull back from DIFC. Walk 15 minutes south and stand at the edge of Jebel Ali's container terminal. This is where the financial abstraction becomes physical reality, where the numbers in those glass towers translate into actual goods, moving through actual ships across actual water, or where they used to. Marine insurance underwriters in London began quietly adjusting Gulf risk premiums in late February. The adjustment was not announced. It appeared in contract renewals, in the fine print of coverage amendments, in the additional clauses that experienced shipping executives recognize immediately as signals. The industry's way of saying that the calculus has changed without saying it directly. When insurance costs rise, shipping companies run the math. When the math no longer works, they reroute. Colombo, Singapore, Salalah. Imports that were always secondary options are now appearing on primary routing proposals in logistics boardrooms from Hamburg to Shanghai. Jebel Ali processed 14.5 million TEUs in 2024. In 2026, that number is trending toward revision, downward. The cranes are not idle, but the rhythm has slowed. And in a port, rhythm is everything. Slow the rhythm and the entire supply chain behind it compresses, backs up, costs more, delivers less. The businesses that chose Dubai because of Jebel Ali's efficiency are now running their own calculations. And the calculation increasingly returns an answer that involves the word elsewhere. The golden visa illusion. They sold it as permanence. The golden visa, a 10-year residency, a signal to the global professional class that Dubai was not just a posting, it was a destination, a place to build something real. In 2022, the program was a phenomenon. Lawyers, doctors, tech founders, fund managers, people who had been treating Dubai as a temporary assignment, suddenly applied for long-term status. Property purchases surged. School enrollments surged. The retail sector surged. The Golden Visa was the moment Dubai convinced a generation of expatriates to stop treating it as a transit point and start treating it as home. Now look at what home means in 2026. Property listings in Business Bay have increased 40% in the first half of the year. Not because supply expanded, because owners are listing. The professionals who purchased in 2021 and 2022, who committed to Dubai on the promise of stability and growth, are now running exit calculations. They are not running them loudly. There are no community meetings, there's no organized departures. It happens in private WhatsApp groups, in quiet conversations between colleagues who both notice that something has shifted. In the decision to not re-enroll a child in school for September, the Golden Visa promised 10 years. The people who hold it are making different decisions with the remaining 8. What is a residency worth when residency no longer feels like stability? What is permanence when the environment around it keeps changing faster than any 10-year plan can absorb? The conference rooms. Nobody books. There is a metric that the hospitality sector tracks obsessively and that almost nobody outside the industry discusses. It is called MICE revenue. Meetings, incentives, conferences, exhibitions. For Dubai, MICE was not a category, it was a cornerstone. And the city built its entire business calendar around the flow of international conferences. GITEX, Arabian Travel Market, Cityscape, the World Government Summit, events that brought 60, 70, 80,000 delegates through the airport in a single week. In 2026, the cancellations and relocations began arriving, not with drama, but with policy language. Force majeure clauses invoked. Alternative venue assessments commissioned. Insurance requirements that certain conference organizers could no longer satisfy for events held in specific geopolitical risk zones. The conference hotels along Sheikh Zayed Road, properties that ran at 94% occupancy during event weeks, are now managing forward booking calendars that look nothing like 2024. Empty conference rooms are not just empty rooms. They are missing networks, missing deal flows, missing the casual conversations in hotel corridors that turn into business relationships, that turn into capital commitments, that turn into the kind of economic activity that a financial district runs on. When the conferences leave, the ecosystem around them hollows out in ways that take years to fully understand. And Dubai is only beginning to understand. Here's the expanded, deepened version, what the numbers don't show. Every report will tell you about vacancy rates and flight cancellations and capital outflows. Analysts will cite the percentage points. Consultants will build the slide decks. Financial journalists will run the comparisons to 2009, to 2015, to every previous moment when Dubai looked fragile and then somehow didn't break. Those numbers are real, but they cannot capture what is actually being lost. What is being lost is the story. Dubai's greatest export was never oil. It was never even logistics or finance, or the re-export trade or the free zone arbitrage that made accountants in Geneva and Singapore take notice. Those were mechanisms. Those were the machinery underneath. The actual export was a story. The story of a city that defied geography, defied history, defied every reasonable prediction about what was possible in a desert on the edge of a turbulent sea. A city that looked at its own limitations. No river, no rainfall, no agricultural base, no democratic legitimacy, no centuries of accumulated institutional trust, and decided that none of that was relevant. That will was sufficient. That vision, applied with enough capital and enough speed, could manufacture from nothing what other cities had taken generations to build. And that story was the product. And every skyscraper, every artificial island, every record-breaking tower, every airline route and luxury hotel and financial free zone was not infrastructure. It was marketing. It was the physical embodiment of a narrative that said, "We are the exception. Come here and you become part of the exception." The story attracted the capital. The capital built the infrastructure. The infrastructure attracted more capital. And the cycle ran not for 5 years, not for 10, but for 30 years, on the fuel of a single idea. That Dubai was the place where the impossible became normal, where the rules that applied everywhere else simply did not apply here, where you could arrive with nothing and leave with everything, because the city itself was a machine for the conversion of ambition into outcome. For 30 years, that idea held. For 30 years, enough people believed it, or acted as if they believed it, which in markets amounts to the same thing, to keep the cycle running. Now walk through the business district at 2 in the afternoon on a Tuesday. Take the elevator to the 34th floor of a tower that was fully leased 3 years ago. Walk the corridor, listen, and ask yourself what story the empty floors are telling. Not the story of a city that defied everything. Not the story of the exception. The story of a city that believed its own mythology so completely, so uncritically, so without the institutional capacity to question it, that it never built the redundancy that every system needs to survive the moment trust wavers. It never built the domestic consumer base that absorbs shocks when foreign capital retreats. It never built the democratic feedback mechanisms that force governments to respond to deterioration before deterioration becomes crisis. It never built the anchor industries, manufacturing, deep technology, agricultural processing, that give a city weight when the narrative economy softens. It built the story instead. And the story was magnificent. And for 30 years, the story was enough. But trust is not a foundation. It is an atmosphere. And atmospheres can change without warning, without announcement, without a single dramatic event to point to. There is no morning when the newspaper announces that the atmosphere has shifted. There is no press conference. There is no official acknowledgement that the invisible thing that made the machine run has begun to thin. One morning, the air just feels different. The lobby is slightly quieter. The coffee shop on the ground floor of the tower has a table free that was never free before. A colleague mentions, almost casually, that their firm's regional head is now based in Riyadh. Not transferred, relocated, permanently, and the people who are sensitive to that difference. The ones who built careers on reading rooms and markets and risk, who develop the instinct for when a position is about to turn before the data confirms it. They feel it first. They don't announce it. They don't write the op-ed. They don't hold the press conference. They update the lease renewal conversation. They have a different answer when the headhunter calls from Singapore. They book the exploratory trip to Riyadh, to Abu Dhabi, to Warsaw, to wherever the next story is forming. And then they leave. And the floor is empty. And the lobby's quieter by exactly one company, one team, one cluster of people who had been spending money and creating demand and generating the low-level daily economic activity that makes a business district feel alive. And the story loses another paragraph. Stand in the lobby of any major DIFC tower at 6 p.m. on a Wednesday. Watch the security desk. Count the people passing through the turnstiles in a 10-minute window. Hold that number. Now compare it to what it would have been 18 months ago. Not through data, not through a report. You will not need a spreadsheet for this. You will feel it. In the acoustic quality of the space, in the way the sound of your own footsteps carries differently when a room is half empty. In the expression of the security guard who sits behind a desk that used to require 3 people and now requires 1, and who has had enough time in that quieter lobby to notice everything. Cities do not collapse the way buildings do, all at once with noise and dust, and a clear moment of before and after, a date you can circle on a calendar and say, this is when it ended. That is not how cities die. That is not even how most businesses die. The dramatic moment, when it comes, is usually just the official acknowledgement of a process that began long before anyone was willing to name it. What happens first is thinning, quieting, a loss of density so gradual that any individual day feels almost normal. You can walk through a declining business district on a random Thursday and convince yourself that nothing is wrong. The towers are standing, the lights are on, the coffee's available, the lobby plants are watered. But come back every week for 6 months. Don't look for the dramatic indicator. Look for the accumulation of small absences. The restaurant that used to require a reservation and now has walk-in seating every night. The parking structure that was impossible at noon and is now half empty by 11 a.m. The elevator that used to require patience and now arrives immediately, every time, because there are not enough people to create the pressure that used to make you wait. That is the data the reports don't capture. The erosion of friction. And in a business district, friction is evidence of life. Dubai built the most impressive business district in the region. There is no serious argument about that. Glass and steel and ambition at a scale that made visitors from London and New York and Frankfurt pause at the taxi window and genuinely reconsider their assumptions about what cities could be, what could be built, how quickly the material world could be reorganized by sufficient will applied to sufficient capital. That ambition is still visible in the architecture. It is not going anywhere. The Cayenne Tower still twists. The Index Tower still rises. The sky bridges still connect towers that were built for a future that was, at the time of their construction, genuinely imaginable. You can stand in the street and look up and understand, viscerally and without any explanation, what Dubai was trying to become. The ambition is there. It is embedded in every facade, every lobby, every sky bridge connecting towers that were built with the absolute assumption of permanent occupancy. But ambition is not the same as trust. And a business district, not a tourist attraction, not a theme park, not an Instagram destination, but a genuine working district where capital is allocated and companies are run and careers are built, runs on trust the way a desert runs on water, invisibly, desperately, without the dramatic visible evidence of its presence until it is gone, and then with catastrophic and very visible evidence of its absence. The companies in DIFC and ADGM are not there because of the architecture. They are not there because of the tax rates. Though the tax rates are part of the calculus, they are there because their counterparts were there. Because the deals could be done in person, across a table, done in a city where the right people were concentrated. Because the regulatory environment could be navigated and the legal framework could be trusted, and the infrastructure would not fail.